Jim Crow was a system of laws, policies, and customs that operated to discriminate against African Americans in virtually every aspect of social, political, and economic life. Well, ask yourself if some of the rules and laws governing felons today kind of remind you of a bygone era. Denial of the right to vote, right? 47 states and the District of Columbia deny prisoners the right to vote. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because in the United States, pretty much the only country in the world that denies people the right to vote once they've been released from prison in many states. In fact, about 1 out of 4 African American men have been permanently disenfranchised in a few states as a result of felon disenfranchisement laws. And nationwide, the figure is about 1 in 7. Employment discrimination. Employment discrimination, perfectly legal once you're branded a felon, right? Job applications ranging from Burger King clerk to accountant, got the box. Yeah, got to check that box if you've ever been convicted of a felony. Thousands of professional licenses are off limits to people who are labeled felons. In some states, you can't even get a license to be a barber if you've been convicted of a felony, right? Housing discrimination, perfectly legal. You know, back in the Jim Crow era was the era of racially restrictive covenants, right? Well, today, you can be discriminated against on the basis of your criminal history. In fact, public housing is off limits to you for a minimum of 5 years. Minimum of 5 years if you've been convicted of a felony. So here you are, newly released from prison, right? No money, no job. Public housing is off limits to you. Private landlords are free to discriminate against you. And, you know, your mother, aunt, sister, girlfriend who lives in public housing, well, she risks eviction by housing you, allowing you to stay in the apartment, right? So what are these folks to do? No job, can't find a place to stay, right? What are they expected to do? Well, they're actually expected to pay thousands of dollars in fees and fines. Following the collapse of slavery, you know, black men were routinely arrested for, you know, extremely minor crimes like loitering or vagrancy, right? They were arrested and sent to work on plantations through a program known as kind of convict leasing, right? The idea was that they had to earn their freedom, but the catch was they could never earn enough to pay back the costs of their shelter and their food and their clothing, and so they remained in perpetual servitude, a system that you know, some have called worse than slavery, right? Well, today we have a similar system. Even if a former prisoner manages to get a job, you know, you're one of the lucky few who manages to get a job, up to 100% of your wages can be garnished to pay back the cost of your imprisonment, to pay back fees, fines, and court costs, to pay back accumulated child support while you were in prison. So here you're one of the lucky few, you get a job, up to 100% of your wages can be garnished. What is the system designed to do? Right? Put you right back in prison. In fact, that is what happens about 70% of the time. Within 3 years, 70% of released prisoners are returned, and in fact, the majority of those who are returned within a few months, because the hurdles, the barriers to just making it on the outside are so extreme. Public benefits. Don't expect even to be fed if you have a drug felony. Discrimination is perfectly legal against those who've been labeled felons in public benefits. In fact, if you're a drug felon, you're ineligible for food stamps for the rest of your life, thanks to President Clinton. Even if you're a pregnant woman, someone with HIV or AIDS, basic food stamps off limits to you for the rest of your life. Exclusion from jury service. You know, of course, one of the hallmarks of the Jim Crow era were the all-white juries, you know, particularly in the South. Well, today, those labeled felons are automatically considered ineligible for jury service. In some areas of the country, you know, the all-white jury has come roaring back because such a large percentage of the African American community is deemed ineligible for jury service. Now get this, even if you haven't been branded a felon yet, if you have negative experiences with law enforcement, that disqualifies you from serving on the jury if it might lead you to be, impartial in a criminal case. So good luck. In many communities of color, finding someone who has not yet had a negative experience with law enforcement that just might justify your exclusion from a jury. But as bad as all the formal barriers, to political, economic, and social exclusion are, as bad as all these formal barriers are, in my experience, many people labeled criminals find the stigma the hardest to bear. It's not just the denial of the job, but the look that flashes across an employer's face when he sees the box has been checked. It's not just the denial of housing, but being a grown man having to beg your grandma for a place to sleep at night because nowhere else will take you in.